Welcome one and all, it's time. The Deadzone UK Championship Tournament Report. Allegedly the number one, the premier Deadzone event of the year. Does it measure up? We'll find out shortly. So, the Deadzone UK Championship, the tournament with a twist. Well, one twist that we knew about well in advance, and then several more twists that came later on, shortly before the event. So, for this event, you are allowed to take two different strike teams. It's a 2-day event with 8 games, and you have to use each one of your strike teams 4 times throughout those 8 games. So if you wanted, you could just take the same strike team twice, essentially, and just use the same one for 8 games, but you wouldn't really be giving yourself many options. You could take 2 slight variations on the same list, so that you would have a couple of options at your disposal, depending on what you came up against, any tweaks that you'd want to make, depending on specific opponents or their strike teams. And you also have the option of taking 2 totally different factions as your 2 strike teams, which I thought was a splendid idea for an 8-game tournament, because I think playing the same faction 8 games in a row, for me at least, that would get a bit tedious. So I was pleased to be able to take 2 factions, not least because I think my Plague are much stronger. The lists I take for Plague tend to be pretty damn strong compared to my other factions, and I also really like the paint work I've done on the Forge Fathers, so I didn't want them to be neglected. So if it was a 1-faction tournament, I would have had to take the Forge Fathers because they're my new hotness, but I don't think I would have done very well, because I don't think I've necessarily got the tools at my disposal to put together a really competitive list with them like I have with the Plague, where I've got a lot of models to choose from, some of which are very, very powerful. So we're going to go through my lists first of all, and, well, I say first of all, but it should also be pointed out that at this event, the Mantic staff member who organised and wrote the tournament pack left Mantic shortly before the event, so it was kind of thrust upon some other members of staff for the weekend, and they certainly did their best under trying circumstances, I would say. And there wasn't too much in terms of blunderage. I think there was only one matchup that was input incorrectly early on, which was then rectified partway through the tournament. So it didn't have too far-reaching consequences. Other than that, let's see, what else was affected? Things like the plans for lunch on each day were kind of up in the air, because the staff who were drafted in at the last minute didn't really have any idea what was planned for that kind of thing. So that was all a bit chaotic, but it was fine. So let's get on with the actual games now. Get rid of the thumbnail, and you can see here that we've got my list A. So this is my Forge Fathers list. And there was a tournament that was due to take place a few weeks before this that was cancelled, where I had a 250-point list ready, and I specifically painted a Hellermal pattern Iron Ancestor. Really expensive, 54 points without any upgrades. I painted that specifically so I could put that in a list with the Juggernaut at 250 points. To fit it in at 200 points, which this tournament was, I had to get more Bombots painted, because you need more of them to unlock the 2 support slots, especially considering one of them that I've chosen is obscenely expensive. So I had to get an extra Bombot painted. So I've gone for all the cheapest options I can, really. Got the Chief Brocker, who is pretty good actually. He's got Tough, which better than Armour, of course. Frenzy, he's pretty tasty. We've got 4 regular Brockers, who I'm not that obsessed with, if I'm being honest. They're okay at fighting, but they're not great at range, of course. Fairly survivable, you could say, with a survive of 4+, but they don't have any armour, they don't have Tough, so they're not that survivable, really. 2 Bombots, which are just hilarious. Don't give away any victory points. Boom 5, which may well be the highest boom in the game. I can't think of anything else that has Boom 5. I believe the Exploding Moorbeast and the Burster, I think they've only got Boom 4 at best. They certainly don't have 5. So Bombots do have that going for them. We've got the Iron Ancestor, the most expensive version, with the Magma Cannon, Twin Magma Cannon. It's only range 4, AP 3, weight of fire 1. So that's a really nice ability there. The weight of fire being on that gun, because you're not going to get a lot of dice when you're shooting with these things. It does shoot on 4s, which is reasonable, but the stat lines for the walkers aren't what you take them for, because their stat lines are average at best. Range 4 is decent, fight 5, survive 5, not great, but it's the armor 4, HP 5, size 4, that is what they're all about, really. And also, this one in particular, fire control, so you can fire both your weapons, because it also has a flamer in the claw hand. So it's only range 2, but it's It Burns, which is quite important. I decided to take 2 It Burns weapons in this list, both on walkers. So we've got one on the Iron Ancestor there. Not particularly long range Iron Ancestor. Range 4 is reasonable, but not that great, but you'll see how I've tried to mitigate the lack of range in a minute. So we've got the Juggernaut, the Torture version, which has the Dragon's Maw, which is a slightly longer range flamer with AP 1. And it's also got Frenzy on its power drill, which is pretty decent. So that one's slightly better at fighting, slightly worse at shooting. But the shooting with the Torture, really, you just want to be setting things on fire usually. So you're not that bothered if you initially kill things, because the flames can always do it for you later. And the Heavy Inferno Drill Mining Laser is what I've put in there for a bit of range. It's a very cheap specialist. It's a vehicle, so of course it's not going to go up and down a level. So on some terrain it's going to get a bit stuck, but for only 16 points, and it gives away 2 victory points, 3 HP with armour, and it's got the firing platform of course, so it's going to add an extra dice when you shoot, and it shoots on 4s. So AP 3, range 8, that's pretty tasty. That's going to threaten most things at range. And even if you can't target enemies directly from the start of the game, you can usually overlook an area with critical objectives on, for example. So I find I do get some good use out of it. Onto the Plague list, so 200 points of Plague. What is the standard Plague list that I normally take? Well, you're normally going to see 2 Mortars, 2 Teratons, and 2 Plague Swarms. That is the standard. You normally see an HMG, but I don't have one here. So I've got the General, just because the General is cheap, because bringing zombies back isn't particularly good. We've got 4 Hellhounds. It should be pointed out actually that in my first game with the Plague at this event, I think I accidentally used 5 Hellhounds, because I had an initial version of the list that had 5 of them in it, and then I rejigged a few of the options and brought a zombie in instead to free up a point, so I could change one of the other choices. So I did correct that later on, so I may have played 1, I think it was only 1 game with an extra hound, hopefully not 2. At least one of them though I lost, so we'll stamp out any accusations of cheating right now. 2 Mortars, as you can see there, and you know what I've totally forgotten to do? Let me just bring up the episode thumbnail, because I haven't enlarged my mouse pointer so you can see what I'm pointing at very easily. Let me just correct that right now. Let's get that embiggened. And there we go, look at that. It's a beast. So 2 Teratons, obviously very, very good. Size 3, fight on 4s with armour and tough. It's the teleport that's really the big deal though. Knockback is pretty good as well, but it's teleport really, because you can hide and then you can decide their engagement, essentially. You can decide who they're going to fight. Next page, Plague Swarm, 2 of those. Always very, very dangerous. Not quite as survivable as the Teraton, because they don't have armour. They still have tough, and they do fight on 3s, so if you get them into combat with the AP 2 as well, extremely dangerous. For 20 points, I think they're very good value. You just don't want to get them gunned down. but tough does help you a little bit there. We've got one leaper, and the plague swarms and the leaper all have agile, so they can go up or down terrain more easily. And we've got, there's the other hellhound, and finally a zombie. So if I ever take a zombie instead of a hellhound, it's because I needed the extra point, and the zombie is 1 point cheaper. So the hellhounds are quite tasty though. They're fast, they have frenzy 1. The stat line isn't great, but you're not really that bothered if they get killed. They're only giving away 1 point, and a lot of enemy models would fear a hellhound. They wouldn't really fear a zombie on its own, but it's in there because it's cheap. So this is the list I'm up against in round 1, and you can see it's the plague with a plague general like mine, hellhound, mortar, Teraton, swarm. So that the list's very similar up to that point, then suddenly aberration. I haven't gone for a huge creature in my plague list. And a ghoul, and okay, you can see the numbers of the units here as well. So there are 2 plague swarms, only 1 Teraton, 5 hellhounds. So it's not ridiculously dissimilar to my plague list. And the first scenario is patrol. And I go for my Forge Fathers in the first game. So you roll off before the game to decide which player is going to pick their strike team first. And then the other player can obviously look at what the first player picked and then choose which one of theirs is more suited to it, unless they've already used it 4 times, in which case they're stuck with the other list. So you can only use each one 4 times throughout the event. So would it have been better to maybe have the players each pick their strike team in secret? Maybe, I'm not sure better is the right word, but it would have been different. Maybe it would have been more fair, perhaps, because it's possible that you could have you could lose every one of those roll-offs and go up against a strike team that's well suited to defeat the one you've chosen in every single game, until the last game where neither player is going to have a choice. So potentially could have ended badly for someone. So I've gone for the Forge Fathers. I think I had to pick first, and my opponent went for the Plague. You can see there's a Plague Swarm there, which I'm going to assume is the result of a recon move. I'm not sure actually. No, I don't think it is. I think that tower actually is right to the back. And 2 point objectives there, 1 point objectives there. How do I feel about this? Plague, I don't think are a particularly good matchup for me here, because my walkers are safe against most things in the world. The aberration is one thing that they're not particularly safe against. And yeah, a lot of factions don't have a close combat way of dealing with these walkers. The usual thing I'd be concerned about is missile launchers. Anything that's ridiculously high AP with long range, particularly if it's mounted on a jet bike, which still has AP 5, despite it being a mobile, light missile launcher being carried by a jet bike, still has AP 5 for some reason. But anyway, Teratons are a threat as well, because Brockers and the mining laser, they're not going to stand up to a Teraton. They're okay at fighting, but against a Teraton or a Plague Swarm, no. And a Plague Swarm could actually be a threat to a Juggernaut, because it's got AP 2. The Juggernaut only has armor 2. So I don't think it's the best matchup. A Plague Dog is probably, if it gets the charge in, which it probably will against a Brocker, then it would have a chance. Even though it's vastly cheaper than a Brocker, it's not horribly outmatched in combat. The 2 Bombots against the Plague, probably good, because they're going to want to close the distance and they're not going to have much to shoot me with. The Mortar, of course, could hit the 2 Bombots, but it's not going to get any victory points for them, and it would prevent them shooting at something else. So there's my setup. I've got my mining laser here. We determined this wasn't the higher level. This was just the ground level, basically, so the mining laser can go there. It can't go up to the next levels, though. And over on my opponent's side, we've got the Aberration there, we've got a Teraton, Plague Swarms, we've got the Mortar right in the corner, and all the dogs hiding down there. I've got lots of move dice and 1 shoot dice. I would rather have probably more shoot dice and less moves. My opponent gets some activations, some moves. You always want moves with the Plague. Being able to turn the Teraton's teleport ability from a 3-move teleport into a move a cube and then teleport 3, or teleport 3 and then move a cube is quite a big deal. And the aberration's not particularly fast, so of course you want to be using a move dice on that to get it into the action. So the first thing that activates is the mortar, and it knocks down my leader and kills one of the Brockers. So the danger for me with this list is that everything is really easy to kill apart from the walkers. So it's very likely that at some point, if I played a list like this enough, everything would die and it would just be the 2 walkers left. Which in some scenarios wouldn't be too terrible. In one where the objectives are spread out, that would be bad though. So I've got my bomb bots working their way up, just hiding a bit, waiting for the enemy to come close. Because even something like an aberration, you wouldn't want somebody throwing 5 dice at them with a bomb bot detonating on you. Because even if you've got armour, even if you're tough, for instance, those 5 dice, it's very possible you're going to get some 8s in there and end up with a large number. And of course you don't want the aberration to even get wounded really, because it's got rampage. Some dog movement, sneaking around, and getting a lot of move dice does help me move my walkers further forward, of course. Got some ammo there. But all the objectives being down the middle means that I do have to actually go to the centre. And I do manage to put a wound. Oh, actually, I'll tell you what's going on here. So, this is a smoke grenade here, which I launched, and I can't remember what I was protecting myself from, because there's not a lot that actually shoots on the opposition. So I can't remember exactly why I fired off the smoke grenade. But anyway, there it is. And ended up hindering me because the aberration just walked behind it. But I still managed to get 2 wounds on the aberration. It's the Iron Ancestor that has a smoke grenade, by the way. Because I had 3 points left over. And there's the aberration there. So a Brocker has been pinned there by the looks of things. Teraton jumps up onto the 2-point objective, as you'd expect. And looking at all the other objectives, 2-point there, doesn't currently have anyone on it, there's a 1-point there. So the Plague pick up some points in round 1. There's not a whole lot of killing done. I think it's just 1 Brocker and a 2-point objective are the only points scored so far. So, next round. Oh, of course, I would have to get a nice glare on the dice for this picture, but I think that's a shoot. Activation, extra dice, and fight. Oh yes, I took another picture. How thoughtful of me. And my opponent's got more activations. Move. Not a shoot dice, which is good because the mortar's not going to fire twice. So we've got Teraton versus Iron Ancestor. Fun. The Iron Ancestor, it's possible to do alright against it in combat if you've got lots of AP. The Teraton only has 1 though. So I would question whether that's likely to do anything. And the Iron Ancestor can always break away from you and then shoot you in the face without too much threat. The Aberration tries to activate. While wounded, rolls a 1 or a 2 and goes nuts. And I then used the Aberration to eat my opponent's Plague Swarm, which was right here. Yum yum yum. So my first kill of the game is done with an opposing model. So those are the dangers of Rampage, everybody. Look at that. Plague Swarm eaten. Over here you can see that this Plague Swarm has been wounded from shooting as well. So putting wounds on lots of things at the moment. I send my Juggernaut up onto here after the Teraton abandoned it. Oh, you can see here that my Iron Ancestor broke away from the Teraton and had the choice of doing an open shot on the Teraton. And I can't remember whether I completely missed or elected to shoot something else. I think I just rolled badly. Down here we've got Dog being wounded by Brocker. And we've got a human hand Very important for gaming purposes to have a human hand involved. There's the Plague General that's come up to get involved in the game, which you don't often see. And we are on objectives now. So I'm sitting on the 2-pointer. My opponent is sitting on maybe all the rest. Maybe not the one down here yet. I'm not sure, we haven't seen a picture of that yet. But the dog is on that one. There's a dog on this one. And so I've got some points on the board, but I'm still behind in the next round. So I think I do get rid of the Teraton this time. I think I managed to shoot it with the Iron Ancestor. And then he moves in to attack that dog, but fails to kill the dog in combat on the objective. And I don't have a fight dice, so I can't do it again. So that's kind of unfortunate, but it does happen. The Iron Ancestor only fights on 5s. And you can see here that the Aberration is primed. If it passes its Rampage test this time, it won't be able to fit in there because the dog's in there with the Iron Ancestor, but it could definitely go for the Juggernaut. And the Juggernaut would not like to face that thing at all because armour will be completely ignored by the Aberration. And the Aberration also has an extra dice for smash, I think, and it also has the extra size, because the Juggernaut, even though it's much larger model than the Iron Ancestor, has size 3 compared to 4, so it's also smaller than the Aberration. So we'll see how that goes if it happens. I think the Plague General hides again after having a pot shot before. Okay, so that's why I would have put the smoke down then, to hide from the HMG. You can see that I've got a Brocker wounded up here by the HMG, who's abandoned this objective because there's a dog on it now, so it isn't needed. So I'm running out of models, and you'll notice that the mining laser's also dead. No, it's not. It's there. It looks like it's in the corpse pile from there, doesn't it? But it's not. I had to move it a bit to get a decent line of sight for a shot. And the Aberration jumps up, eats the Juggernaut in one go. Nom nom nom, Juggernaut is dead. So the Aberration has now killed one significant model on each side, and I think it's looking like game over at this stage, because there's not a lot left to be done, really. My opponent is quite close to the 20-point threshold, and I am not. So, I've got some fight dice, which probably not what I need at this point. Could have done with shoot dice. Got activation and a move. My opponent's got extra dice. So, look at that. There's a wound on the dog that's in there with the Iron Ancestor. So an Iron Ancestor cannot kill a dog. We know that now. Established fact. So I think I'm down to the Iron Ancestor, the mining laser, and I think there's a Brocker or two around somewhere. So earlier on in the game, I'm not sure it was fully picked up in the pictures because it didn't actually happen, but the Aberration was hesitant to get too close to the bomb bots, which was kind of funny, which is why it was back there at the start, I think. I think it had the opportunity to get closer, but it would have gone within range for them to detonate on it, which it didn't want. So look at that, sad face, 21 points to 10. So Forge Fathers get a loss. And some of the weaknesses in this list come out. Things are very easy to kill, and the stuff that's hard to kill, there are certain things in the game that don't struggle to kill even those. So if the enemy list has something like an Aberration or a missile launcher, then suddenly everything in my list is easy to kill. Okay, on to the next game. After game 1, on to game 2. Uplink. So you can see the layout here, standard deployment areas, and a 2-point objective there, and a couple of 1s there. So look at this beautiful focused picture of the Asterian army list that I'm facing here. So let's see if we can work out what any of this stuff says. So, I think there are some marionettes. That looks like it says marionette. Cipher. I'm almost certain that says cipher. And I can't really make out everything else. I think that might be another cipher. But we know pretty much what everything is for the Asterians, because I've faced them quite a few times over the last few months. and they're quite scary. And there was a decent amount of AP, I think, in both my opponent's potential lists. I think I lost the roll-off and had to choose the Plague first. So I thought I didn't want to take my Forge Fathers against lists with a lot of AP in them, since the two survivable models that I have in that list would just get killed. So I went for the Plague. This is kind of an anti-Asterian Plague list, because the Mortars are really good at killing their one wound models. I can't remember what they're called. Is that the marionettes that are just one wound? Or is it the ciphers that are one wound? But anyway, there are some that are quite easy to kill, and some of them have missile launchers, but they're still fairly easy to kill. So dropping mortar shells on them is usually a good idea, especially if you can go first. And Teratons are not threatened by most of what they come up against. Plague Swarms would do well if they can get in. But one thing that's noticeable, a lot of the tables at the event, which was at Mantic HQ by the way, so using the Mantic terrain mostly, I think there were only maybe 2 or 3 of us that brought our own terrain with us. Most of the tables I felt were a little bit sparse. This is an example. It's pretty much the standard, this level of terrain. This is what most of the tables were like. And I would say that a game of Deadzone should be a bit more three-dimensional than this. I think it should have more going on. I don't think you should have that much of it being contested on the ground, but that's just me. I'm not sure whether my opinion is backed up by the rules of the game, because there are some units that would suffer from that. For example, vehicles that have to stay on the ground. So I prefer Deadzone to be much more three-dimensional, though, as you can tell by the table that I made for Deadzone, which is extremely three-dimensional, and you'll see when I get to play on it at this event. So, there are some reasonable hiding places for some of my units here. Magas says, it does look a little low, yes. So I think they were a bit stretched thin for their terrain, because there were a lot of tables to cover and not many people brought their own. So you can see my setup. I've got mortars hiding as best they can, and everyone else is just staying as much out of sight as they can, because Asterians are known for having some tasty shooting in the first turn. So I think this guy can just deploy anywhere. We've got some, is it thermal cannons or something like that they're called? E&C. Just as well the full 40 didn't turn up. Yes, I think they did have the capacity for 40 players, but only 11 of us turned up, I think, which is actually pretty terrible for the UK National Championship of Deadzone. I'm not going to put that on the players, I'm going to put it on the fact that the game isn't thriving at the moment, and could they have advertised it a bit better? Was everyone actually aware that the National Deadzone Championship was going on at the weekend? Or would that be a surprise to most people? Because obviously there was something that went wrong there. If it's your national championship and you get 11 players for a game that's very active on social media compared to the tournament scene, I would say that's a problem. Somebody did actually suggest, I can't remember who it was at the event, suggested that maybe calling it the UK National Championship put some people off, because maybe there are lots of new players to this game who have maybe jumped in with Firefight and have the models that are available for Deadzone use as well. So calling it the UK National Championship maybe was a bit intimidating, and it being a 2-day event, maybe people thought it would be a bit too hardcore and serious, so maybe that's why they didn't go. But obviously Mantic should be doing an inquest into why it only attracted so few players. It's one of their longest running game systems, and they should be focusing energy onto building that community. Magas says, hosting my first Deadzone event, I found it trickier to fill up than the Kings of War ones. Yes, Kings of War tournament scene is definitely doing a lot better than Deadzone. There's no arguing that. So, there's lots of decent weapons here. I think that, I can't remember which ones are missile launchers, because they all kind of look the same to me, the Asterians, but we'll assume that they have some nasty AP weaponry, because lots of them do. And the little crummy ones don't. So I think the specialists, let's see, was there a way to identify the specialists in this list? There may well be. I think it might be it could be the shoulder pads, Maybe the ones with just plain white shoulder pads are your standard lame troops. But look at that. I've got some shoot dice and move dice. That's good for plague. My opponent, however, is going first. Activation. 2 shoot dice. So people will know what I think about this combo. Going first, having an activation dice and having 2 shoot dice. For certain armies, it's an immediate death sentence. It's not an immediate death sentence in this game, though, I will say. There are games and scenarios where it is an immediate death sentence. For example, the deep strike scenario where you deploy really close together, and or even a list that has lots of aerial deployment and scouts where they can overlook your whole army, like this model is doing, for instance. You can just pick a target and maybe even get an open shot on some of them. There are lists that have a lot more models like that in them, and if you're going first with an activation dice and 2 shoot dice, potentially you could just wipe out half your opponent's army before they've even activated a model. So I think there are things that need to be looked at in this game, and I think being able to use the activation dice with the first activation of the game, so you activate 2 models before your opponent does, I think is one of the things that could stand to be removed, as well as the deep strike scenario, which we'll get to when that comes up in this tournament. So, Mortar is wounded from shooting, and when it shoots at the enemy, it does nothing. Hits the floor, and the other mortar is killed. So 1 mortar dead, and 1 mortar wounded, and tried to use a shoot dice as well, but both shots just totally missed. Which is unfortunate, because that's really phase 1 of how to combat Asterians. Now, this scenario does not have a lot of objectives, and it does not have a lot of points available for scoring on objectives. So if you want to move into open ground and get open shot at the end of the round, the price you pay for that, you only get 4 points for it. 4 points for putting a model in totally open ground. I don't think that's going to be worth it against the amount of firepower I'm up against here. So my plan in this game is to hide the Teratons, don't let them get shot because they can be pinned. I think there's a weapon over here that blasts and just automatically pins whatever it shoots at, which is another thing. I've been thinking a lot lately about what I've described as like feel bad mechanics in games, and one of them is where something just happens automatically that stops your units from doing something and you can't do anything about it, and your opponent didn't even have to do anything, they just chose for it to happen. So, for example, weapons that auto-pin a cube just because they choose to shoot at it, whether they hit it or not, whether they have any kind of success, they just say, I'm shooting at it, it's pinned. Just look at something and deciding that it's pinned, for example. Those aren't the kind of mechanics I like. In general, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I went to an Age of Sigmar tournament and there was an army list there that had quite a few of those kind of feel-bad mechanics in there, where it's something that just denies you the ability to do something with your units just because they say so, often without a dice roll being involved. And those are things that, used in moderation, I can generally be fine with. But anyway, I think that's a discussion for another day. So, my plan. Teratons, they're going to hide. I'm going to wait till I get a move dice, because the Asterians don't need to come close to me at all. So I'm going to wait till I've got a move dice, then teleport out and try and eat something. That's the plan, and I'm going to use this underside of this cube here as well to hide some dogs maybe, and then they'll jump out and eat things later. That big thing is obviously pretty scary. So I'm moving up, got my zombie, got my plague swarm moved up. Teratons are not going to move at all because they'll just get auto-pinned and then they'll be stuck for the whole game. So they're hiding until I get a move dice. And you can see everyone else is slowly being shot up. The Leaper takes a wound, and as a result of taking a wound, fails his rampage test and has a munch on my mortar. But thankfully does not kill it. That would have been nightmarish. I throw a dog up onto the 2-point objective, and it gets killed. as you'd expect. So, first round, down 6 points. Next round, I've got a move dice. Woo! Activation, fight, and splat. Splat is not that great. Bringing back an activated, pinned zombie is not the best splat in the world. My opponent has activation and shoot, which is obviously very good for early in the turn. So my Plague Swarm kills the model that was on this objective, and then rather than sitting there and being killed and being open shot by the enemy, decides to jump back down again. So I think that was my only course of action there. And this Plague Swarm jumps up there and kills the model that was on the roof there. So Plague Swarm's doing some nice killing for me. This does mean that I'm not going in with the Teratons this turn, because I felt the Plague Swarms were more guaranteed to get the kills. So I'm saving the Teratons for next turn. And the Teratons, of course, won't even need a move dice if my opponent decides to go onto the objectives. Like here, for instance, I could just teleport underneath and like punch upwards. And I've got my zombie on an objective. Do you shoot the zombie? Do you waste a shot killing a zombie, or do you just let me get a victory point, is the question I'm posing there. And you can see that this big, impressive creature... Now, I was under the impression that in this game, you couldn't get a clear shot if a model was at a greater height than you. But that's not actually in the rules. What it actually says is that it doesn't say anything about that. It just says that you have to be able to see every part of the model and its base, essentially. Which usually means that if you're below it, you can't do that, because you won't be able to see all of its base. However, this thing is really tall, and can actually see up here, with part of the model, not like a big antenna sticking up, just its head. So it was able to clear shot the dog. My Leaper and the Mortar are very good friends, obviously. Trying to kill each other a minute ago. So the enemy don't need to get that close to me. They can just stand back, shoot things. They're already in the lead. Maggers says base all units on stilts. Well, you could do that, but any part of the model that is like hanging out to the side or taller than the model would actually be don't count for line of sight. To my understanding, it's only within the cylinder of the base and to the standard height of the model. Spoony says, how bad was the event? The event was not bad at all, actually. The organisation was obviously a little bit hectic because of the circumstances surrounding it, and the tournament organisers, if you will, having to step in at the last minute, but I don't think they can be faulted for anything. And I can spoil right now that all the games were fun. So, I've got a dog into combat. Look at that. Very exciting. But it doesn't do anything and it gets wounded. Unless it was already wounded. Yeah, I think it already had a wound, but it doesn't manage to kill anything. But it is alive in the cube. And now it's not in this picture. So, yes. It's not going too great at the moment. And I do send a Teraton down here. And this is where I found out that the blast weapon just auto pins the Teraton, because I don't think I actually studied the list initially. And yeah, so that was a little bit surprising that there was just an auto blast weapon that automatically pins a model that it just looks at. So the Teraton is pinned, but it is pretty close to the enemy. So, let's see, it's 2 away. So, if it stands up, it can move 1, then a move dice to get in. So, potentially it could get into combat next time if I get some move dice. I send my Leaper into this big thing. Doesn't do much, though. And I think my zombie's dead now. It's shot by the enemy leader. So I've lost all... Yeah, I've got an illegal dog in this list, because I accidentally packed 5. So one of these dogs is illegal. So I've got a few points, but similar to the first game, I'm behind, but do get some points on the board. Next round. Oh, my opponent found some intel as well. And I'm not sure what I'm taking a picture of those two dice for. So I get a Plague Swarm to attack the enemy leader who came out to kill a zombie. So I get some juicy points for that murder, which is nice. Plague Swarms are doing their bit. The enemy are far enough back though that with not really a lot of move dice to my name, Teratons are kind of stuck. This one just gets shot while it's down. You can see all the wounds piling up on it. And I think my mortar's still alive though, which is nice. Spoonie says, did it need to be a 2-dayer as that's what put me off sadly? Well, considering we only had 11 people, it certainly did not need to be a 2-dayer. We had 5 games on day 1, so that certainly would have been enough for that many players. If you're going to have 8 games, what kind of field would you say justifies having 8 games? Definitely more than 20. You would think maybe something like 32 players. 8 rounds would be great. For 11 players, unless you heavily mess with the draw, then there are going to be people playing each other 3 or 4 or 5 times. And I'll go into how that was mitigated later, but there was some manipulation of the matchups to prevent that from happening. Which, again, is something that we were kind of deciding during day 1, because the Mantic staff that kindly stepped up to run the event weren't involved in the planning of the event and had to step in at the last minute. So I think we all, as players, particularly those of us who have been to a lot of tournaments, helped out a bit with suggestions on how the situation could be resolved, the one with the lots of players facing the same one over and over. So the mortar does actually, looks like it kills something now. Look at that. Forestarian's dead. But then it gets killed. So both mortars are dead. And I've got some Gribblies left. And a nice upside down shot at the table there. But my Teraton, look at that one. That's done nothing for the whole game because I just haven't had the dice. A nice upside down picture. So I lose 11-21. So again, I do pick up some points. So they're not complete like blowout losses, but I haven't been able to secure enough points yet. Scenario for game 3 is Scour. So this is one of those scenarios where there are some armies that are just going to be inherently bad at it and some that are inherently good at it. And it also comes down quite a lot to the positioning of the items on the table, because you want to pick up items and deposit them in the X. And some strike teams are going to be really good at that. For example, Veermin are really good at it. All their models are fast and they can handle items. You have some armies that are definitely not so good at it. Anything with a lot of beasts, for instance. Or anything with very few elite slow models. So some Forge Father lists are going to be awful at this. I've gone for my Forge Fathers though, because I thought the 4 Brockers and the Brocker leader would actually stand a chance at doing a decent job in this one. And my Iron Ancestor and the Juggernaut can kind of head into the middle. Now, it's also noted that this scenario has 6 rounds, but you can't score kill points in the first 3 rounds. Bum bum bum. So, if you shoot anything early in the game, you will get nothing for it. Apart from removing that model from the table, you'll get no victory points for it. So only in turn 4 will you get points. And I knew which army I was up against here, because this was the spare player list, really. So it's a Plague Lord. It is 3 Leapers, 4 Leapers, 5 Leapers. So obviously Pretty scary in combat. 2 bursters. And there's also... There should be another page, but there's also a corruption, which is a 7 HP plague killing machine. Is also in there, and I'm not sure if there's anything else. I'll have a look in a moment when we get to the pictures of them. But there's the plague forces, lots of leapers. I think they're all the new plague models as well. So I thought if I went for my plague here, I would probably want to get close to the enemy, and that would mean getting close to a plague lord. I don't have any of the big plague stuff. It's nothing that would fancy its chances against the plague lord. So I decided to go for the Forge Fathers. Also, my plague are just going to be bad at this scenario because I've got some beasts in there, and I'd be using things like Teratons probably to ferry items back, which isn't ideal. So I've gone for the Forge Fathers, and I am going to gun things down early in the game. I'm not going to wait till turn 4. I would rather just get them off the table, because I know I'm going to score scenario points with my Brockers. That's all I'm going to use them for, and I'm just going to shoot with everything else. So, shoot dice, move dice, going to be useful in this scenario where you need to get back to drop off the items. My opponent's got lots of move dice, which is great for that list. Mining laser. Immediately wounds one of the leapers on the building. I tried to aim at something that I could actually hurt, really, and also something that has rampage, because we saw how useful that can be. No points scored in the first round, because all I could do was jump onto items. I didn't have the time to bring them back, because, let me just have a look, you can see there's lots of them around, but the Brockers aren't very fast, so they can collect an item, and then I'm going to have to spend the next few turns ferrying them back to this cube here. So, next, look at this. We've got an on-fire leaper, because I've got my Iron Ancestor in there, setting things on fire willy-nilly, and I think a bomb bot detonated around here somewhere. Or did I kill the burster? Hold on, were they bunched up? The burster's definitely gone, which was shot off, and I've set fire to this guy. So I think I've detonated a bomb bot. Or no, I haven't. There's one. No, I haven't detonated one yet. These guys being down must be a result of the burster. So the Iron Ancestor is really useful here, because most of these things aren't going to be effective against it. The Plague Lord's really slow. If he doesn't get in, then it's fairly safe. And they're just going to hold the front line here and allow the Brockers to ferry the items back, and hope I don't pick up a booby trap. Shoot dice, that's what I want, and move dice, very useful for the scenario. And look at that, my opponent gets no move dice at all, which is terrible for the Plague Lord. So the corruption is actually up here. You'll see in a moment that I've got my mining laser targeting it, and I've done 6 wounds to it out of 7. And that's probably good, because that means it's not dead yet, which means I might be able to finish it off in turn 4 and actually get victory points for it. So getting things 1 wound from death is risky, because obviously they can still fight, but it means I might score points for them later easily. I've got my leader up there, I've got another Brocker, I'm just dropping off items there to get victory points. Iron Ancestor setting more enemies on fire, and a burster moving up. They're obviously a threat. Down here, there's a leaper that's come in, but I've got my Juggernaut ready to threaten that. And a bomb bot does go off this time, and it is this one. Goes into there, and let's see who is there. I think I used my move dice, I think, to detonate the bomb bot, because detonating is an action, unless you just go into combat, in which case they don't have to fight you, and you have no fight stat. So I think you move. I moved here, used a move dice to move there, and then used the other action to detonate. So, did some wounds by the looks of it. And now it's gone. Poor little bomb bot, but it did its job. And in terms of scoring, it's looking pretty easy this game actually, because the Brockers, I was able to pick up lots of items with them and I'm just taking them back. The 2 walkers, pretty safe. Plague Lord is still stuck back there. And yeah, not much to report on that turn. I've got some points. The Plague have dropped off 1 token. So, because I'm dropping them off into this half cube, then I can't fit all my Brockers in there at once, so they're going to have to move out to make way for the other ones to come in. Next round. Shoot dice, that's what I'd like to see. Would have liked move dice though. My opponent does have a move dice this time, so the Plague can benefit a bit. However, the corruption is dead. I think it walked into the bombot and started a fight with the bombot and killed it to get it out of the way. And that was a bad idea, is all I can say about that. We've got a Burster fighting against the Iron Ancestor. And I would rather just move away and then shoot it rather than fight it and have it explode. But even an exploding Burster isn't that much of a threat to the Iron Ancestor. So the Plague is just kind of sitting there being shot to death, really, by these 2 flamethrower beasts. And it's going very smoothly. You can see just the wounds piling up. The Plague, I think that's the Plague Lord, who rather than fighting is trying to score points by going back and dropping them off there, which I think is probably a bad move. I think the Plague Lord is the only thing that's really a threat to my walkers, should be in there fighting them. And don't worry at all about the scenario points until later. So, extending the lead, building up points, and now we can actually score kill points from this round. So, I've got some move dice, which is good. So is my opponent though. And moving away from the enemies and then shooting them with clear shots quite often, doing wounds, gunning things down, and yeah, there's not a lot of Plague left at this point. Mowing them all down with guns, and I think they're almost all dead. I'm not sure if I actually killed... Did I kill the Plague Lord? Yes, I did actually. So, okay, what happened was, I believe I put the Juggernaut in here to fight something. What was there? It was this wounded Leaper. The Juggernaut got in there at the end of the game to fight it, killed it, and the Plague Lord then came down into combat with the Juggernaut, but the Juggernaut kicked its butt and killed it with a really good dice roll. So all the Plague are dead. Forge Fathers pick up a zillion points, drop off tons of tokens, and that'll be that. 21 points to 4. So, big win for the Forge Fathers. Next scenario, divide and conquer. So, this is definitely an interesting one. You've got 2 very valuable objective areas on either side of the table, and the deployment does stick forward a little bit. So you're a bit closer together than in some of the deployments. And in this one, I've gone for the Plague. So, my reasoning behind choosing the Plague, it wasn't much to do with my opponent's army actually. It was more to do with this table. Very densely packed terrain, and it would have been very limiting for my Forge Father vehicles, my mining laser and the 2 bombots, to get anywhere on this board. So I decided Plague, there's lots of cover for the Teratons, so I thought I'd give them a go on this one. And I'm up against the GCPS. Do I have a picture of the GCPS list? I'm not sure, but there is... What's his name? Is it Commander Rocker, something like that, who has the advanced deployment? So there is... Let's see. There are some of the Riot Shield guys down there. There are some Standard Marines. And there are some fancy weapons in there as well. but it's fairly standard, I think, GCPS kind of thing you'd expect. The fact they don't have much AP, I was leaning towards the Forge Fathers on that basis, but because of this table, I thought the Plague would be more suited, and the scenario is quite good as well for the Plague. Spreading out. The Plague is supposed to spread, isn't it? So, first thing that happens, you can see I've got a move dice and some extra activations. The Plague Swarm manages to kill the sniper that had forward deployed on there. I think, actually that's a sniper, I think the other one may have had a sniper rifle as well. But the Plague Swarm is able to reach it immediately at the start of the game. I think maybe it got to shoot first. Am I right in that? I'm not 100% sure, but the Plague Swarm eats it anyway. Then after that, the sniper in the tower tries to shoot at the Plague Swarm and just fails horribly. Like, from above with a sniper rifle, you would think it would do something, but just completely failed, which then means that next turn, the Plague Swarm can jump down there with one, and then climb up 2 vertical surfaces for 1 point of movement because of its agility, and therefore eat the sniper. So we'll see if that happens. I've got my mortars hiding as best they can. I've got Terratons underneath the buildings because they don't want to get shot. And you can see all these GCPS. There is actually a good line of sight that you can't see from above under the buildings. So my Leaper, who came out into the open, gets pinned immediately. So you can see there is a path through underneath all this terrain. And they're coming out a bit, but I don't fancy their chances, to be honest. And my opponent only had 2 GCPS lists. Neither of them, I think, would be greatly suited to dealing with the Plague on this scenario, because they're going to have to try and get on the objectives, because there's lots of points available there. There's 8 points you can score on those objectives per round, and I don't think they can compete with the models that the Plague can put onto those objectives. So it's going to be very tricky for them. The Leaper is dead though. But Plague Swarms and Terratons are just going to be a nightmare for all this size 1 stuff. You can see we've got a pinned Terraton, but it is on an objective. So obviously it doesn't mind. We've got dogs being set on fire. We've got a flamethrower over here. Spoonie says, good to see OG Plague models. Yeah, I don't have any of the new Plague yet. I'm not sure whether I actually will, because I've kind of given up on my Plague. I took them to this event because you're allowed to take 2 different factions, and Forge Fathers are clearly my current favourites because I like how I've painted them, and they're more recent. I don't think my Plague are painted particularly well. They're striking, definitely, but I don't really like them. I think the basing's a bit boring, so I'm not that keen on the Plague anymore. I don't really enjoy playing them as much as I used to, so that's why I'm not going to be using them very much. But at this event, take 2 factions, so why not? Because they are clearly the strongest of the ones that I have. So one of the dogs just gets killed from being set on fire here. And what I was noticing that my opponent, when I sent a model forward, it was being shot. So I was sending things forward that I didn't really care about being shot. Eric says, Andy back at it again with his orange paints. Yes. There is plenty of orange in the Plague, and a fair bit of orange in the Forge Fathers as well, even though it's not the main theme for the Forge Fathers. The theme is really the white with the kind of pinkish recesses. So we've lost some models here, but as I was saying, when I move something forward it's being shot, so I'm throwing things forward like dogs, so that my opponent will then shoot the dogs, and he'll have used the shot, and then I can move something else out, with 1 less model to worry about shooting at it. You can see 1 Terraton is there, the other one is over here on an objective, and I've scored a lot of points in that round. My opponent has scored a few, but I've got 9. So I did some kills, killed that model, jumped onto some of the objectives, and very nice. So I think, did I get a dog onto this? I don't know if I've got a picture of it. Is there a dog on this one maybe? I'm not sure if it's there yet, but at some point I will have a dog on this objective. I'm not sure if it was that turn. So, move dice, shoot dice. Always good for a mortar. Move dice, always good for plague in general, especially swarms. Teratons as well like the move dice. My opponent has lots of fight dice, which is not the best. And the splat is... it's kind of a not that great frag attack, from what I recall. So the plague swarm, immediately up into the tower to eat the sniper. And of course it does, because he's a hungry fella. Hungry, lots of little plague fellas, really. The mortar wounds that guy by the looks of it. And Teraton versus the... what are these guys actually called with the shields? The GCPS. They're really good though, so it's a good fight there. The Plague Swarm eats the guy with the Flamer, the other Plague Swarm. So we were discussing and we determined that these were half cubes. Because technically, it's kind of a full cube, but I think that's more of a wall rather than a floor, this bit. So the Teratons can't access them. Only the Plague Swarms can get up there. And more Eaton models. And the Teraton, you can see, is actually in a different cube now, not on the objective. So I think one of us had exited the cube and then the other chased. So I'm pretty sure it was the GCPS that moved. Or... I'm not 100% sure how they came to be there. We've got dog versus GCPS marine action. Mortaring them off the buildings. Doing wounds, lots of them out in the open. Look at all these wounds being dished out. And strategically here, what I want to do is have a Teraton guarding each side, really. And then I've got dogs in reserve to jump onto objectives at the end of rounds to get points. And then the Plague Swarms are just going to be hunting things down. There's one at the top of the tower. There's one there. And I think the zombie might be dead now, but the zombie and the dogs... the zombie actually might be alive at this stage. The zombie and the dogs, their role is to just leap onto an objective at the end of a round, get me 2 points. So, comically, my opponent, with a frag weapon, shoots the Plague Swarm in the tower, and it scatters directly onto the objective and takes no damage. So the Plague Swarm is on the objective, pinned, which is quite hilarious. There's the zombie. So we've got a zombie in action against the GCPS there, which is always fun to see. So I'm scoring loads of points now. Look at that. Dun, dun, dun. So I've almost won at this stage. Which is good to be in that position where you're close to the victory threshold. Ian says it's Riot Trooper, the GCPS have. There you go. So, lots of points, very close to the 20 threshold. My opponent's nowhere near it, which means at this turn I can just concentrate on racking up as many points as possible to get to a nice juicy high number. Got some move dice, always good for the plague. My opponent does have some shoot dice, which is always good for the GCPS. But the Plague Swarm is just eating everybody. And the corpse pile is growing. The mortars are clearing out some of the enemy as well. Another bit of action as the Plague Swarm gets wounded. Mortar shoots the enemy mortar. So, the enemy mortar, interesting thing. That mortar barely got to do anything during the whole game, because my mortars were constantly spending at least one shot a turn to pin it. And if you get into a mortar war, if you have the mortar supremacy, then I think really you have to stay on top of it by pinning the other player's mortar. Otherwise, they'll pin one of yours. And you don't want that. In fact, if they have the shoot dice, they could get lucky and pin both your mortars. So, yeah, I decided to just keep shelling the enemy mortar just to keep it out of the game, take it out of the equation. Because I think if we both were down a mortar, I would still have one. and my opponent would have a 0, and I think that's a sizable advantage. So I'm quite happy to take my mortar out the game by shelling the enemy mortar. Better to have 100% mortars than what am I trying to say here? Better to have double... No. It's better to have infinitely more mortars than your opponent than double the amount of mortars they have. That's what I was going for. So, better to have 1 versus 0 than 2 versus 1. So, taking them both out the game by shelling the enemy. Plague swarms are dead though. They get shot up. I think one of them was on fire, so that's how it died when it tried to activate. You can see that dog's on fire as well. But, dog diving onto the objective. Enemies coming in here. So, this riot trooper killed the plague swarm, and then it decided to go into the Teraton as well, but didn't have quite as much success there. So I'm not picking up quite as many points this turn, and a nice upside down page again. So 23 points to 9, so I only picked up another 5 in that turn, as did my opponent. So the GCPS turned it around a little bit in that turn, but it's too late. They didn't really turn it around, they were steadying the ship, weren't they? So into the next game. I'm now on 2 losses and 2 wins. The next scenario is scatter. So there are objectives here, 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 and here, and you set up in opposite corners. So which faction would this suit, do we think? Well, I would say it depends on the terrain. So let's look at the terrain. It's very sparse, apart from a couple of buildings. So my thinking was, when I looked at my opponent's lists as well, so this particular opponent, I can remember both of the lists. The Marauders, which I'm facing here, have got some decent ability in close combat and some exploding Maw-beasts. And I thought, you know what, they don't really have much AP. And the other list that he had available to him was a plague list with 30 zombies and a leader and nothing else. So I thought, I'm going to take something that has a lot of armour. I'm going to take my Forge Fathers, because even if everything else gets killed by more beasts, those 2 walkers are going to live. All the objectives are really close together, so if I sit one of those on an objective each and just keep flaming away at the enemy, then might do alright. And the Brockers can just jump out and do what they can. If I can get a charge in with them on anything, they might do alright. I don't fancy their chances against more beasts, especially exploding ones. So in this corner, I've got the mining laser, because this is the position I decided it had the best view of the enemy. We've got the Juggernaut, a Bombot, and we've got my leader and a Brocker down there. My opponent has got a lot in this building here. I've got my Iron Ancestor perched up there, and I've got my Bombot down there, and I've got 3 Brockers under there. So, one thing that I totally neglected to look at on my opponent's list. So, I saw that there was a kind of a missile launcher, but it's like a frag launcher of some description. So, looking at that, I'm pretty sure I might have assumed it was indirect, which is why I've put all my Brockers inside this building underneath. However, it's not. It's a weapon where all you have to do is look at the enemy and say, I am blasting you with this gun, and then roll to wound them. There's no hit roll involved at all. So all you have to do is just point it through the window and say everyone in that cube is now being blasted to smithereens. So I should have paid more attention to the list, but also, that's kind of a ridiculous thing to exist, a weapon where you just look at the enemy and it just hits them. I don't understand the logic behind it. Anyway, I think this Marauder list won Best Painted, by the way. So, wrap your eyeballs around them. Some very nice Maw-beasts. So I've got some activations and some shoots, which are good. My opponent's got some extra dice, which may come in useful. So, the first things I do The Iron Ancestor comes down off his perch and starts shooting people. Comes down so we can see them and starts trying to gun them down. Does some wounds to this grunt bot. And so this is the weapon in question. Just on a regular dude, looks through the window and kills all 3 Brockers instantly. I think it did 5 wounds, basically. So didn't have to roll to actually land in there, like you do with the other kind of frag stuff. Yeah. Anything that has that sort of effect, usually, like a mortar or a grenade launcher, all of those things you have to roll first of all to hit, which is a dice roll you can't add to, and then you have to see how many hits you score effectively after that, which you also can't add to with extra dice or anything. So there's a lot of steps you have to go through, and it's tightly balanced, if you will, by not being able to throw extra dice into it. They've got the mortars and the grenade launchers exactly where they want them, and they don't want you to be able to skew it because it would be very powerful. But this weapon is just obscene. Just looks at you, you start dying. Doesn't have to land in there. Anyway, what I thought would be a good balance for it, since it's kind of like a rocket launcher, missile launcher, grenade launcher type thing, more like a grenade launcher, because obviously it can hit multiple things, then if you don't want it to have to land in the cube and maybe scatter, how about just having it slightly easier to hit than a grenade launcher, which it should be really anyway, because you're going to be looking into the cube you're shooting at. If it fails to hit, then just like scatter it left or right one, so you could still target it so that it's very likely to hit something. But I just think it's a lot to be able to hit everyone in the cube like that with a really powerful weapon. If I think about other things that can have a similar effect, let's look at flamers, for example, where you just roll and suddenly everyone in the cube is on fire, regardless. However, those flame weapons are nowhere near as potent, I would say, as that thing. I think that has more dice. I think, is it Frag 4 or something? I'm not sure if I took a picture of the Marauder list here. But anyway, I think it's quite potent. So, the bomb bot is also dead there. I think one of them gets shot down. On with the game anyway. So I'm moving towards the objectives with my surviving models. Ian says flamers are normally range 2. Yes. So they are balanced in that way. So I just think it's a strange weapon to exist, is all I think about it. So lots of Marauders are left alive. Not many Brockers are left alive. I've got my 2 Walkers, though, who are very survivable. And I'm just going to march them into the middle and start trying to kill everything and not die. Actually, there's a picture of the list there, but I can't actually see what it says. So, I want shoot dice, not this. My opponent has shoot dice. So I'm moving on to the objectives and just shooting things. The Iron Ancestor is really good for this because it can fire both its weapons. So with all the objectives being closer together, I'm always going to have a juicy cube to flame and then pick another target for the big gun. Moorbeast goes after the mining laser. And the Juggernaut is setting fire to that cube, which has a grunt bot in it. So at this point, everything... all my normal Brockers are dead. I think my leader is still alive. I think he's in here. Oh no, now he's dead. So now everything is dead apart from the Walkers. So I've got a Juggernaut and I've got an Iron Ancestor left against most of the enemy force. However, because I'm going to be occupying 2 of these objectives very shortly with my Walkers, there's not that many points on offer to score for my opponent here. Not going to score on these 2 because I've got my Walkers on them. So they're going to be scoring a maximum 2 points a turn, probably not going to kill me. So it's going to be a very slow crawl to the finish line while I'm gunning them down because they have to stand here to score points. So we'll see how that goes. You can see they've got a decent number of points. They've got 14, but they're probably only going to get 2 each turn. So at the end of turn 5, they should reach 20. But I'm going to get 2 a turn, probably, for that, just for the objectives. And I'm also going to be killing things. So it's going to be interesting. And I've got the shoot dice this time, look at that. I'm going first, I've got the activation and the shoot dice. So this is where it could turn around now. So I've got the Juggernaut onto one of the objectives, set some people on fire. The Iron Ancestor shoots, kills some enemies, uses a shoot dice, shoots again, kills some enemies, sets a cube on fire, and it's suddenly looking a bit healthier, although a Maw Beast does go into combat and wound the Juggernaut, which I don't like the sound of, so it gets a pretty good roll to do that. So look at that, suddenly, those are the 2 points, as expected, but suddenly I've got 7 in that round and I'm catching up. Next round. So the Juggernaut moves out of the cube because I didn't want to punch the exploding Maw Beast in the face while I'm wounded. So I moved out of the cube and then flamed the Maw Beast with this beautiful flamer, did nothing to it, and then it charged back into combat with me. So I'm now regretting moving out of the cube. And how about this for the combat when it charges in? So I've got 2 successes. Shall we have a look at how many successes the Maw Beast has? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wow. As you can guess, a Maw Beast does not start combat with 11 dice. So it was a very ridiculous 8 train that did that. How many 8s can we see here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 8s were rolled. Wah, indeed. So that causes the death of the Juggernaut. And the fact the Juggernaut was killed was enough to push the Marauders over the threshold by 1 at the end of turn 4. No, Spoonie, the Juggernaut sadly does not have armor 9. And of course I was able to pick up points because I was still gunning things down with the Iron Ancestor willy-nilly. So I was really catching up there. So if the Juggernaut had lived in that turn, then I would have needed to have scored 5 points to get a draw in the last round, which is very possible with the shooting that I've got available to me. Because of course I would have been sitting on at least 1 objective, probably 2 if the Juggernaut was still alive. So I wouldn't have needed to kill that much. So we could have been heading for a draw with a bit of luck. But unfortunately, we got this instead. So, one thing about the Juggernaut and the Iron Ancestor. One thing that I am kind of lobbying for at the moment, and I would maybe apply it to other walkers in the game as well that have decent armour. There are a lot of weapons in the game around at the moment that I see with AP 5. First of all, that's pointlessly high because I don't even think there's anything in the game with armour 5. If there is, correct me. But I think an Iron Ancestor with its armour 4 should have some defence against something like that. So what I would be in favour of is removing a point of armour from walkers and giving them tough. Because it won't affect their interactions with 99% of the models in the game. Most things attacking it, armour and tough will be exactly the same thing. So it won't change any of their interactions. The only thing it'll change is when they get shot with an obscenely powerful AP5 or AP4 weapon. Or if you're a Juggernaut, something like an AP3 big laser or something like that. It would just give them a little bit of an extra chance at not being one-shot by one of those very powerful weapons. That's the only thing it would affect. And I think that is a change that should be made, probably without even a points increase. Well, at least the Iron Ancestors shouldn't have a points increase, because they're already... Are they too expensive? Maybe. But they also don't die unless they face one of those weapons I was just talking about. I don't think they need a points increase. If any of the other walkers have any particular side effects that I'm not thinking of that they would benefit from having tough instead of one of their armor points, then of course they could either not have this change or they could have a points increase. I think the Juggernaut would benefit quite a bit because with it only being armor 2, there's going to be quite a lot of weapons that punch through that easily. So it would help the Juggernaut a lot, so that might actually need a points increase with this change, but Iron Ancestor definitely not, I would say. Okay, next game. We're on to day 2 now. So at the end of day 1, 3 losses, 2 wins. The Forge Fathers have played 3 times. At the Plague, have played twice. So I've got 2 games to play with the Plague on day 2 and 1 with the Forge Fathers. I think the Plague are a stronger list, so I should be in a good position going into day 2, able to use them twice. On day 1, the Plague picked up a win, the Forge Fathers picked up a win, Plague picked up a loss, and the Forge Fathers picked up 2 losses. Invade. So there's a very expensive, very valuable objective that you can only score on your opponent's side, and then there are 2 lesser objectives in the middle. So this is the list that I was up against. GCPS, Ranger Lieutenant, Veteran, 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 Trooper, Heavy Weapons Team. So we've got a mortar. You can see how many there are. There are 2 veterans with thermal rifles, which is AP2. Pretty powerful. We've got 2 riot troopers, who are pretty tasty. We've got a one corporation veteran specialist with size. I've got this picture, I can't actually read exactly what it says there, but it's a range 10 weapon. And we've got 1 with a flamethrower. Apparently that's a sniper, this one. So I think the flamethrower was accidentally left off the table for the whole game. Wow, wow, wow. So I think I was being shown which one was the flamethrower. So it was kind of like, here, look at this one, this is the flamethrower, I'll put it down here so you can look at it. And then it was just totally forgotten. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So we're on my table as well, which means there is the basement. So the way I've built my table, there is a level underground, and it's not technically something that the rules cover. So the way I like to play it, if my opponent is willing, is that this level up here is the ground level. So this is where vehicles will deploy. And then this is like ground -1. So you can set things up down there. But obviously there will never be objectives in any of the unreachable parts of it because they always go on the higher area there. There is an open side of it as well, and there are these holes. So because I've got 2 plague mortars in my list, obviously the entire enemy force is in the basement, even the mortar. So it's not going to be able to shoot, but because I'm going first, then obviously it just wants to pop out and then shoot up through the hole. I think there's a sniper down at this end, so as far as I'm looking, the sniper is over there somewhere. So I've got my Teratons underground. They're great on any kind of terrain where you've got places to hide. So this is good. Also good would be a terrain that has a big fully closed off building with solid walls, but it has a hollow interior that the Teratons can just go inside and teleport from there. Anywhere that's like a staging post for them to attack from. I've got 1 mortar up top, 1 of them down in the hole to shoot out the hole. I've got my leader down there who's probably never going to move. Plague Swarm's ready to jump straight out. And Leaper raring to go there, and Zombie on its own. So my plan is that I don't think my objective is going to be under threat at all here, because any GCPS foolish enough to come this far across the table are going to get eaten. So I think it's all about, can I get to the enemy one, really? And I get some extra moves because I won the recon test, and I was able to move my Plague Swarm forward, and this Leaper also goes forward. And I get some nice move dice as well, which is always good. No shoot dice though. My opponent does get a shoot dice, so we'll be able to use the mortar, because it has to move first before it can shoot, obviously. So, Plague Swarms are heading forward immediately. One of them goes into the middle, always finding cover because you don't want to get open shot. And this one's gone high up. The enemy are piling out under this tower. So beforehand we discussed which towers had hatches and which ones would therefore be eligible for the mortars to shoot through, for example. And we decided which ones you could actually reach without a hatch, and this floor was decided to be one that is impenetrable by mortars, because obviously you can climb up to get to onto the next level, so it doesn't need a hatch. So there are quite a few GCPS soldiers are positioning themselves under there because it's safe from mortar fire. Teraton working its way across the battlefield underground where it's safe. And Dog jumping onto the objective. Riot Shield pops up and finds a booby trap and gets blasted over here with a pin marker. So most people lie down their miniatures, but I can understand anyone who doesn't want to do that because you don't want to scratch up your paintwork. I tend to lie down my Plague because I don't really care that much about them because the paint job isn't that great on them. I found an adrenaline shot with the Leaper, which is actually really useful. It would give him some extra speed. Mortar fires up through the hole. Kills a couple of GCPS soldiers who were working their way forward out of the basement in this direction. Couldn't see the cube obviously, but managed to hit it still and murdered two of them. Nice start. The enemy mortar pops out, takes a shot and pins and wounds my other mortar. So first round, 3 points for me, 1 for the GCPS. So I think that's 1 dog murder, and I killed those 2 Marines. Next round, my mortar kills the enemy mortar with 1 shot. So that's a really good roll to do that. Look at that. They are nicely painted. So both of the factions that this gentleman, who I believe is in the chat there, brought to the event were very nicely painted. Very effective paint job. So the Teraton that was sneaking down the flank in the basement teleports out into the cube that has 3 or 4, it might be 4 GCPS guys in it. And the only thing I have to ask is, which one is weak? Which one is not very good at fighting? I want to punch it. So the Teraton kills another one. And hold on. Yes, so one of the corpses is new. I don't know if he kills it outright or whether he wounds it and then punches it into the wall, which then kills it. Because with knockback, if you're in an enclosed area, that little bonus, if you fail to kill a model that is not very tough and might actually be susceptible to a wall punch. Nice little trick to have. This Teraton just goes forward. It's hiding a bit. It wouldn't be too scared of fighting this Riot Trooper. It would be a decent fight though, because those things are actually really good. 3 dead dogs now. At this point I've realised, by the way, that I was using an illegal amount of dogs. So I'm at the legal amount. Move a zombie onto the objective. And this Teraton that was positioned there teleports and punches the enemy leader, or actually an enemy sniper, in the face and kills it. So the enemy sniper is dead, the leader is there, and there's another one there that I completely forgot about. And you can see the enemy are hesitant because my Leaper with the adrenaline shot is only a few cubes away. So they're just standing in here gunning down some dogs that were inside this building, and that's all my dogs dead now. So obviously my opponent has something seriously against dogs. And if you've read his tournament blog, which I did check out on my work lunch break actually, then you'll see that he's a confirmed cat lover. which I think would explain this pattern of murder going on here. So we've got a Plague Swarm up there, ready to pounce. So obviously, interesting thing with the Swarm is with the Agile ability, it can not only go up 2 levels, it can also go down 2 levels. So without having to do too much extra move shenanigans, it's very easy for it to crawl down walls to get to a lower level, even from this great height. So anyone down there is potentially in danger. Nice cinematic shot there. You can see the Teraton in there with all those GCPS. The other Plague Swarm, which was perched down here behind this terrain, right at the end of the turn, blump, blump, onto the 4-point objective. So that was the whole reason for it being there, because it's a half cube, the 4-point objective. Teratons can't get on it, and I thought Teratons would be a great unit to put on an objective because they can just jump onto it whenever they feel like with their teleport. However, Plague Swarm, also a good choice. It's size 2, so it's the biggest thing I could fit in there, and any enemy model is going to have a really tough time going in there to fight me, and they're not going to get a clear shot on me because there's all this fence around it unless they climb up really high, which they can't do because the Teraton's fighting them. So it's looking good at this stage. 4-point objective scored, and I'm racking up those points, so it's quite a wide margin. That was a very successful turn, up to 15 points now. The zombie scored a point for that one as well. So the enemy entered this cube, the Plague Swarm scaled down the walls and ate them. Yum yum yum. And there's lots of dead GCPS, and there's not a lot of dead Plague, so the Plague are just able to sit on all the objectives, eat, and win 25 points to 4. So those points were all for the dog murders, and there we go, that one's over. Next game, Deep Strike. So this is the scenario I hate. It's the scenario everyone should hate. I don't understand why the deployment zones aren't one space further back. Because it's already an advantage to have things like scout moves, and this scenario does not disallow scout moves, as far as I recall. So, with scout, you could potentially get right in the enemy's face. With things like Teratons existing, all I need is 1 move dice, and you've got immediate first turn charges. You're just too close together, in my opinion. I think they should just be moved 1 cube back. I've had lots of issues with this scenario. I've played it multiple times. I've either completely massacred my opponent or been completely massacred. I'm sure some people could have good games on it if their lists are suited, if their lists are very well matched, but I've only had one-sided games on this scenario, so I don't like it. And the terrain on this board is a bit sparse. I've gone for the Plague in this game, so this is the last chance I'm going to have to use the Plague, and I decided not to use the Forge Fathers on this one, and what was my reasoning? I think my opponent has got a decent amount of AP actually in combat, and the walkers, they don't have the best fight stat. It's not that amazing. So I think I was fairly torn on which one to use actually, because there's not a lot of cover on this table. It's not enough terrain for a game of Deadzone, if you ask me. I would like to see more. So, but because I won the recon roll and knew I was going first, I could put Teratons out in the open, and I'm so close to the enemy. There's going to be immediate turn 1 action, because if you look at the map here, anything I've got in this cube, without even a move dice, 1, 2, 3, straight onto whatever the enemy has in that cube. So I've got a Teraton in that one, I've got a Teraton here as well, and there are snipers in this list, yes. There are snipers on this half cube, which, wise, avoiding Teratons, stick them on a half cube. Why not? And there's a kind of a vehicle with a sniper rifle as well at the back, hiding. And lots of peacekeepers. So I thought the plague would be really good for this one, because it's really close to the enemy. I want to get in combat, and I can teleport straight in there. With move dice, I can get things into combat very quickly. Whereas the Forge Fathers, something like the Juggernaut, with only having armor 2, it would actually be concerned about a sniper on high ground, who, on this terrain, might even end up with a clear shot once I start moving. So that would actually be a concern for a Juggernaut. So the Iron Ancestor becomes my real only unkillable thing at that stage. So you can only score the 4-point objectives on your opponent's side, much like the previous scenario, but slightly different layout. And I'm very confident because I'm going first, and I think I'm going to kill things immediately. My opponent does have scout moves though, so one of the snipers is going to get to even higher ground. However, there is a twist. The sniper gets to the high ground and finds a booby trap and falls off the roof and gets wounded and pinned. Can I resist saying lol? Well, I just did say it, but can I resist saying it again? Yes, I can. But that's not the greatest of starts for a sniper. So, I also, as you see, have got models even more advanced here. That is because, after winning the recon roll, all 3 results allowed me to move 1 model a cube. So I've got my Plague Swarm and 2 Teratons forward 1 cube, so they're now an even bigger threat. And immediately, first thing I do, Teraton into there and eat the sniper that was in there. Mortar kills another sniper. The one that was wounded, I think, is the one I shot at with the mortar. And then use a shoot dice to shoot the other one and pin it. So, immediately success in this game. The sniper does get up and shoots at the Teraton, does a couple of wounds to it, but it's still a big threat. So the Peacekeepers, with a wounded Teraton, I wouldn't be that eager to bound into a cube with 1 or 2 of those in, because they are actually pretty good. One of them goes up here. One thing I would be very happy to send into one of them is a Plague Swarm. And that's exactly what I do, but don't manage to kill it. So they're just looking at each other. You can see the other 2 down there. The 2 Peacekeepers that were there moved up into this cube to fight the Teraton. They went in one at a time, or as you have to, obviously. And the second one in gets more dice then for having a friend in the cube, but they didn't kill it, and then this Teraton was free to teleport onto the 4-point objective there. And I've got dogs around waiting as well. That's pretty much what the dogs want to do. They want to occupy an objective when they can. And down on this side, I'm not worrying about the enemy coming forward too much from my objectives, because I've got them penned in and I've been killing things already. So they're all stuck fighting up there. Teraton is quite happy on this objective. I had the option of attacking the dog drone with the Teraton, because it's only worth 1 victory point, but it can suppress my Teratons and stop them teleporting, and it could also open shot my Teraton in the next turn, because I've just sent a wounded Teraton to get 4 points. I decide that taking the 4 points is better than trying to take the dog drone out, though. I want the 4 points now. So, in the end of the first round, 11 points to 0. Nice. And I get move dice and shoot dice. My opponent gets move, extra dice, and some fights, which might be useful. So, Teraton obviously gets killed, but I got the 4 points out of it before it died. I think the sniper moved into a position to kill that. I send my Plague Swarm down after this Peacekeeper, the Plague Swarm that was on this side, and it's going to be fighting it. Didn't do anything first time though. Mortar finishes off the other sniper that it pinned earlier, kills it this time, which is great, so all the snipers are dead. Then, this area is totally clear because it kills the dog drone as well. So I think I've killed everything squishy on my opponent's list now. All the other stuff is peacekeepers. And those two, however, I will say that I don't think I kill everything. I think everything had just been taken off the table before I took the picture. I don't think I tabled my opponent here. So I did get both the 4-point objectives because I've got a zombie on that one and a dog on that one. I did kill... I think I may have killed the two in this cube when they activated to fight the Teraton. I think I killed them. I think the Plague Swarm killed the one here. I'm not sure if I killed that one though. I don't remember if this one survived. So anyway, an even bigger second round, 29 points to 3. So obscenely one-sided game. And again, it's that scenario. It's just bad. That's all I can say about it. If you insist on having people setting up that close together, at least disallow scout moves and disallow recon results where you can move a cube. Because you're just too close. And a combat army going first is going to be right on you. A shooting army going first, if you're on a table that doesn't have a lot of cover, is going to be open-shotting your whole army immediately. It's just not a good scenario, if you ask me. I think it should be gone. Or heavily modified. But that's just how it goes. Next, I took pictures of all the factions that were out on display. I'm very, very proud of these Forge Fathers, by the way. I think they're very, very 80s looking. Plague. They're alright. These are the Enforcers that I just took on. Some of them. Some of these were in the list. Some of these, I think it's 2 Enforcer lists. But some of them are in one list and some of them are in another. Veermen. Very nice. Asterians. I faced these. Very nice. They do remind me a bit of my Forge Fathers. More Asterians. Veermen. So this is a very nice one. I think this is the one I voted for the best strike team. Because I think this just looks very effective. You can see all the detail. I was told that it was a very simple paint technique used on them, but I think it works very well. These are the Marauders that won the Best Strike Team award, so lots of people obviously voted for this one. And you can see why it got a lot of votes. I think, in particular, the Moorbeasts stand out. Very nice. And this is the other list for the same player. 30 zombies and the leader there. We've got some more Forge Fathers. Iron Ancestor. I think this is the Doom Storm pattern, is it called? So lots of suppression going on here with him as well. Some Plague with a Boyd. That's a big gribbly list. Another big gribbly list. I've taken lists like this before. Yeah, so if we compare this to my Plague list, let's have a look. So, it's got 2 Teratons and 2 Plague Swarms. I've chosen to have a second Mortar. So, to fit that in, I've gone for a cheaper leader. And then, instead of an Aberration, I've got a Leaper rather than some of this stuff. And I think this is 2 lists combined here, by the way. So not everything is featured in each one. That's why there's a lot. But obviously I don't have anything large like these 2 in my lists. The biggest thing that I've got... Well, I think the Teratons technically are the same size as this guy, but obviously they're nowhere near as powerful. Maybe more useful in the game, but not as strong if they actually get to fight. So I think 2 Mortars is the way to go. I've always regretted not taking a second one whenever I make that choice. I think they're just really, really good. And the amount of times that you face an enemy who's pretty resistant to mortars is low, I would say. Most games, they're going to be very useful for you. And the kind of things that they're not good against, if we talk about anything that's really solid, for example, and isn't going to be pinned, even then, things that can't be pinned, a lot of those are actually vulnerable to the kind of damage that a mortar can do without the pinning effect anyway. I'm thinking of some of the Asterian models. I don't think all of those can be pinned, but they're very vulnerable to mortar fire. And then if you back them up with things like Plague Swarms and Teratons, if there is any big stuff the mortars would struggle against, Plague Swarms are really good at dealing with that, generally. GCPS. GCPS. Okay, those are the factions I took pictures of. I think there were some more, but they were still playing their game when I was taking pictures. So, on to the final scenario. Now, I've only got Forge Fathers left, so it has to be them in this game. And I was looking at the field of potential opponents, and I was asking some of them which army they had left, because I wanted to have some idea what kind of last battle we might be forced into, because everyone is stuck with whichever list they've only used 3 times in this round. So, what I was thinking was, because of the positions in the table, I had a rough idea how everyone was doing. The player with the Marauder list that I lost to, his other list with the 30 zombies, I was thinking, actually, we're going to be very close together in the table at the moment. It could actually be us. It could be 30 zombies against my Forge Fathers. And I thought, that would be the worst possible matchup for those zombies. What's the 2 things you don't want to face when you are 30 zombies? You don't want area damage that targets the whole cube, because zombies are only effective when there are multiples of them in a cube. And I've got 2 flamers in that list. And you don't want to face things with obscene armour that are just massive and unkillable, because what are your zombies going to do to them? Even if you have a few of them in the cube, you're still not going to scratch them, and then they can just move away from you and then set fire to you all. So even if the flames don't kill you, you're on fire, and zombies, on average, are probably going to be killed when they try to activate on fire anyway. So it's just the worst possible matchup for those zombies if I faced them. And wouldn't you know it, that is exactly what I come up against in the final round. I thought it might happen, and it did. So, let's have a look at the scenario a bit. The fact that it's so spread out does maybe help the zombies a little bit, because I've only got short-range flamer weapons, and I will want to focus them mainly in the middle probably. So there's space around the edges, and fighting against the Brockers would be a much more doable situation for the zombies, I would suggest. It's not very densely packed with terrain, this board. So the first thing you'll see is that I've got my walkers ready to head towards the centre, and then they're going to try and just torch things instantly before they move. So the zombies have to deploy multiples in each cube. So the range on the Juggernaut, for example, means in the first turn I can just move and immediately set fire to a cube with 4 of them in it. And I'm not going to be scoring victory points for killing these zombies, by the way, because they're not worth any. So there's only the enemy commander who's worth anything. And then I have to score all my other points by sitting on objectives. There are 8 though, so that's a lot of points available each turn. They're just spread out. So I'm going to try and dominate the centre with my walkers, flame multiple zombies whenever possible, and control these outer objectives with Brockers. Preferably multiple Brockers in each one, because that way if zombies come in one at a time, I'm likely to kill them. Because if a zombie attacks you and you don't kill it, when the second zombie comes in, suddenly it becomes much more difficult, because they just gain those dice so exponentially. So when you get up to 3 or 4 zombies in a cube, they're really, really tough to kill in close combat. So at that point I would have to flame them. So I would rather be doing that in the middle and not have to move the walkers away from the centre to deal with clumps of zombies on the outside. So I'm going to try and get multiple Brockers into these outer scoring areas. Mining laser, pretty useless in this game. All it's going to be able to do is shoot 1 zombie a turn. I'd be a fool to use a shoot dice on it when I've got flamethrowers. So I've got my Brockers bunched up because why not? The enemy has no real shooting apart from 1 general who is hiding around here somewhere. millions of zombies. So I've got a shoot dice in the first round, which is nice. My opponent has some activations, which is kind of useless for zombies really. First thing that happens, the Juggernaut moves out and just torches 4 zombies off the table instantly. They just all die. The zombies are slowly filing out one by one. The Iron Ancestor moves forward, and I think I had to use a move dice or a shoot dice. So instead of going straight for the centre with the Iron Ancestor, I wanted to set this cube on fire because it's got the enemy leader in it. And it's got zombies. So the Flamer only kills 1, but everyone else is on fire. So there's a good chance they'll die when they activate, at least the zombies. And you have to kind of feel bad for someone who takes a really interesting list like this and you come up against effectively the ultimate counter to it. I'm sure it will discourage people from taking lists like this that are just crazy and out there. So this is at the end of the turn. We've killed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 zombies in turn 1. Over a third of them already. My Chief Brocker, I was quite confident in his fighting abilities actually, because fights on 3s, I think. He's got Tough, he's got some Frenzy on him, and I thought, you know what, he can just stay there on his own and hold that objective, but there is a live zombie in there, so they could start piling up on him, which would be dangerous. The zombies are going to score a few points early in the game because I can't kill all of them yet. So they do make it to the middle, and there's a clump of them there. So it's the one thing zombies have to do to be effective is clump. The one thing that they can't do if there's flamethrowers around is clump. So what can they really do? Because they're the most pathetic things in the whole game if they're on their own. But if they bunch together, they're just going to get horribly toasted. So it's a no-win situation for them, and you do have to feel bad. So you can see the state of play at the end of that round. So only a couple of points scored though. And the zombies do kill my Chief Brocker, because they do pile up on him. It happens so fast because once one zombie's already in there, not dead, the second one gets a dice for having a friend and gets another dice for the horde bonus. Then the second one comes in and you add even more dice, and then each one just gets more and more dice, and it suddenly becomes very scary, so they do kill him. However, I sent the Bombot into that cube then. It's got 3 zombies in it. I thought, you know what? This is the Bombot's time to shine. Been waiting his whole life for a cube with multiple zombies in it, and here it is. So the Bombot just blows up 3 of them in one go. So, at the end of that round, how many have we killed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and the leader. So the leader, I think, was killed by either the mining laser or the Iron Ancestor. And my walkers pretty much just walked into the middle, torched things, and then used shoot dice to torch more things. And I've got a Brocker versus zombie battle going on upon this objective. So I'm not actually standing on that many objectives yet, but I've got enough turns to do it. There's only 5 zombies left against most of my army. We've got a sideways picture there. But again, I'm not gaining that many points because they're not worth anything, these zombies, so I have to score through the scenario. Okay, I do go through the pictures at the start and then rotate them so they're all correct, but obviously I missed those 2. So you can see that I've just been murdering more zombies. I think I do lose another Brocker on the roof, but another one goes up there. And I think I torched off the zombies first. I'm standing on the scoring zones now. I've got a Bombot standing on that one. I've got, I think I've got the mining laser over here. I think I've got a Brocker down there as well, actually. I'll check from another angle in a minute, hopefully. But I'm covering a lot of the objectives now. So in the next round, I'm getting more points. There's only 1 zombie left at this stage. And I think, you know what? In the tournament pack, the margin of victory actually gets you more tournament points. So if I keep that 1 zombie alive and just make the game last longer, then I can rack up a lot of points just sitting on the objectives for the next 2 turns. Even if I'm missing out on one of them, I'm going to get at least another 6 that turn. I can reach another 1 and probably get another 7 in turn 5. So I'm just going to not attack the zombie, leave it alive, and try and just rack up points sitting on the objectives, because that's how it's written in the tournament pack, and that's what you've got to do. So, sitting on all the objectives, nothing really happens. Actually, I think that's the zombie there, trying to get in there and do something, but I'm not going to kill it. I only attempt to kill it in the last turn. So I've got this Brocker down here, I've got the mining laser onto that one, so I'm holding 7 objectives now. So yeah, another 6 in that turn, another 7 in turn 5, which means 25 to 6. And you do have to feel bad, because really, what were the zombies ever going to do against this? If any of you out there can come up with a strategy the zombies could have employed in this game, I would like to hear it. Because for the life of me, I can't think of one. I don't think they had any chance whatsoever in this game. I think they were toast from the moment the matchup was revealed. The scenario gave them a tiny bit of sliver of hope. If it was entirely all the objectives right in the middle, then I think they would have had even less of a chance, because they would have been right next to the 2 things that they're never going to kill, in range of the flamethrowers constantly, and I think that would have been even worse for them probably. Ian says asbestos vests, maybe, because they're not going to suffer from any of the toxic effects of asbestos exposure, being zombies, so that could be a good shout. But really, nothing they could have done. So, I do end the tournament with a win there, and this was the official Mantic goodie bag, this item here, acrylic item counters, which was obviously hastily thrown together at the last minute because of the change in tournament organisers. And I'm going to actually have a look at the tournament pack now. I'm going to go through it and see if there's anything that didn't happen because of the change in organisation before the event shortly. So, let's see. Prizes awarded for placement, hobbying and participation. Yes, that definitely happened. Food. A cold lunch will be provided on both days if you have special dietary requirements, blah blah blah. Well, there were issues kind of with food because the staff who took over weren't aware of any food plans. However, they did buy everyone food. So there wasn't food actually there already, but they did, in effect, provide food for everyone. So that was fine. Let's see, the schedule was adhered to, except for, on day 1, the Mantic HQ was supposed to be open for open gaming until late at night, which it was not, which is only fair, because if you're drafting in people to run the tournament on their weekend off at the last minute, then you can't expect them to hang around till midnight. So I think that's fair enough. The timescale was... it wasn't running too behind schedule, I would say. It was fairly close. Let's see. Prizes were awarded to first, second and third. There were some trophies, which are the usual Mantic Blaine trophies. And I would like to see them with a bit of text on them for future reference. I would like the trophies to actually tell you which event they came from, in case you end up with more than one. That would be nice. There were prizes. There was vouchers, or was it vouchers, or was it like £15 box of Deadzone or something like that? There were prizes for most violent, so killing the most models. There was best painted strike team, which had a trophy as well. Most sporting, which also got a prize. And let's have a look here. Anything else notable? Yeah, I think they... let's see if it says anything in here about goodie bags or anything. Well, it just says you get something for participation, that's all. It doesn't say you're going to get an £800 goodie bag. We did try and claim that it was a £300 value goodie bag that we were all entitled to, but sadly no one fell for that. So yeah, these acrylic item tokens were the goodie bag, if you will. How much did it cost? Let me see. I'm going to try and tell you what the ticket price was for this event, because obviously it's supposed to be the biggest one of the year, and only 11 people turned up. So let's see if I can find my receipt. Just having a look. I'm sure people will be interested to know about this. Let's see. If anyone's got any comments, by the way, get them in now while I'm looking this up. Oh, actually, I don't need to look it up because £35. Okay, that's perfectly reasonable for a 2-day event. I will say that having started in Age of Sigmar tournaments recently, they are drastically more expensive than Kings of War and Deadzone. Like, obscenely more expensive. So even a small Age of Sigmar weekend event, over £60. Kings of War 2-day events that I can remember are typically around 40. 1-day Kings of War events are usually significantly lower than that. 1-day Deadzone events, depending when they are, I've seen them as low as about £10, which is obviously way too low. And I've seen them as probably as high as maybe 20, 25, something like that. But yeah, I think the tournaments are incredibly cheap for the Mantic game systems. It's been discussed before. And people say that the tournament ticket price is probably the least expensive thing when they're travelling and the accommodation. For me, however, since I'm living in Nottingham, right in the hub, the travel is always incredibly cheap to get to anything around here. And I don't need accommodation because I live here. So if I only go to tournaments in Nottingham, then it's very, very inexpensive for me compared to most. And for tournaments in and around Manchester, I've got family that live there, so I can stay with them, so I don't have to worry about accommodation when there are tournaments up there. Obviously, trains are a bit on the pricey side, but I think I've got it fairly easy compared to most tournament goers, who have a lot more travelling to do, and a lot more expenses. So I'm not going to complain about prices, especially for Mantic game systems, because they are, if anything, underpriced. So, Maggers, what did you think the idea to take 2 lists and choose? I thought that was really good. I thought having 2 different factions added a lot of intrigue and kept things interesting, because playing 8 games with the same list, or at least even the same faction over and over again, I think would have got a little bit old, maybe. I think mixing things up was really fun. Allowed people to take 2 drastically different lists, because some factions, there is a limit to how different the lists will be, depending on your model collection as well. And I felt that taking the Plague allowed me to be far more competitive in this tournament than otherwise. I don't think this Forge Father list is actually very good, competitively speaking. I think it's funny to have 2 walkers in at 200 points. I think if I could fit 3 in, I would, and I probably can if I got enough bomb bots, and that would be a hilarious list. The 30 zombie list is obviously a really funny one, but would someone take that if they had to use it in 8 games, where you're guaranteed to come up against multiple armies where you just won't be able to touch them? I don't think you would take it if you had to use it in every game. So I think you do see some more fun lists when you can take different ones, and it just adds a bit of spice, doesn't it? You've got more to look at, more variety, and if you end up playing the same person multiple times, you probably won't have the same combination of armies going against each other. So I like it. It makes sense for Deadzone because you're not carrying that many models. If it was Kings of War, I don't know if I'd like the idea of taking 2 2,000-point armies around with me in a backpack. That might be a bit excessive. But for a game like this, where you don't have many models, I think it makes good sense. For a 1-day event, I don't know if you would need to have the 2-faction rule. Often events will have like an escalating points level, so it'll start off at 150 and end at 250, something like that. I don't always feel that's necessary, but sometimes it does add a bit of spice to the proceedings. People do look at different ways of messing with the lists, though, giving you different options. So, this is all interesting to me because at some point in the future I'm actually going to be running some tournaments. Unless it all falls through, but the plan I've got is to run in the centre of Nottingham on a weekend a Kings of War event, which will have a capacity of 16 players, and a Deadzone event on the Sunday, which would have a capacity of probably a teensy bit more than that, because obviously Deadzone takes up less space. But I don't think Deadzone tickets sell like hotcakes anyway, so I wouldn't expect to get more than 16 for that one. And obviously, splitting the events like that means that people could choose to make it a 2-day experience and sign up for both if they want, or they could just go to one of them, which is preferable for some people. And then, if it's near the station, I can make it. It's right slap bang in the middle of Nottingham, the venue that I'm hoping to use. So, very convenient for anyone who's travelling by public transport. And looking to do that at some point, hopefully within the next few months, would be nice. I need to look at the calendar for the venue and the calendar for Kings of War tournaments to make sure it's not clashing with too much nearby. But that is the plan at the moment. I haven't actually run tournaments before, but obviously I've been to a million of them. And I've got some ideas for how to make them interesting. I like what people do with Kings of War tournaments when they have like an extra beast or an extra monster that you can have as part of your army that you make specially based on a particular theme, and then they'll give you rules for it to add into your army, so I might do something like that. I haven't seen a lot of that in Deadzone, so maybe everyone would get like the orange mutant, something like that they could create and add to their army list for free. And then the best one would get a prize, something like that. Ian says, maybe not so good for people driving, perhaps. I don't know, because I don't drive, so I don't know what the parking is like around Nottingham. But the tram network is quite decent, so I'm sure there are places to park on the outskirts where you could then tram into the centre. I know people do that. So I spent quite a bit of time on the Nottingham trams in the last few months, and they're pretty good. Maga says park and ride is big. I assume that it's big, but I haven't used it firsthand, obviously, because I don't drive. But I'm sure someone will know out there. So if anyone's watching this to its conclusion later, not live, feel free to put in the comments what your experience of parking is like in and around Nottingham. And let me know whether you would be interested in attending a Kings of War event on a Saturday and or a Deadzone event on a Sunday in the centre of Nottingham at some point in the next few months. I've got some ideas, and hopefully, if I manage to pull that off and it goes well, it could become a regular occurrence because it's very conveniently placed for me and it's a good venue. I'm not going to say too much about it though, just in case it doesn't happen. I'll let you know any future developments though, so if you keep an eye on my Facebook group, which should be linked in the description, I changed the name of it, it's called like Orange 2D6 Wargaming Community or something now. If you keep an eye on there. Magus says, Deadzone and Kings of War calendar is a bit busy towards the back end of this year. Well, I don't know if it would be able to happen this year, so it could end up being early next year. I'll have to have a look at all the various calendars involved and synchronise it all and make sure it fits. Because a lot of tournaments do get planned quite a while in advance, so it's something I'm going to have to study carefully before making any decisions. Okay, I think I've kept everyone up long enough. How long have we been going? 2 hours, 9 minutes. That's not bad for an 8-game tournament, is it? Oh, so I can tell you, I can reveal, because I've seen the final standings, I actually finished in 4th place. So I just missed out on one of the trophies. 5 wins, 3 losses, which I think is pretty acceptable. The Plague only lost 1 of their 4 games, 3 wins. The Forge Fathers, 2 wins, 2 losses. So, as expected, the Plague did well. I think it is a really strong Plague list. Double Mortar, double Teraton, double Plague Swarm. I think whatever you pair them with, you generally have to throw dogs in there because you need to unlock a lot of specialist slots. So, anything else you can sprinkle into that list is just a bonus. If you can fit an HMG in there, it might be difficult. Depends on the point level. But I think that as the basis to a list is really strong, and most armies will struggle against it. It depends on terrain, of course, and scenario, and exactly what they have in their list, but in general I think it's really good. The Forge Father list I think is fun. I don't think it's competitive. I think there are too many lists that can just wipe out everything that isn't a walker immediately. And I think there are too many lists that can even threaten them. I didn't choose the Forge Fathers in matchups where they could have been taken out by missile launchers, but in a tournament where you've only got one list and you don't get to choose, obviously they would have to face that kind of thing. And they were kind of shielded from it at this event, and they still didn't manage to win more than half their games. So, I think for fun factor, it's great. I would even like to run 3 at 200 points. The other one would probably have to be another Juggernaut, because it's cheaper, and I could just replace all the Brockers with bomb bots, maybe, to free up the points. I don't know, I might have to downgrade Iron Ancestor to a cheaper one, even though I love this one. His main gun didn't do that much, actually, over the weekend. His Flamethrower ended up doing a lot more, I think. Even though it's only range 2 and it's just a standard flamer. The fact that you can fire both of them, though, is really nice. So, shoot the big gun at somebody, set another cube on fire, then use a shoot dice to do one of those weapons again. If there's a packed cube of zombies nearby, just flame 2 of them. If there's something heavily armoured nearby, use your main gun twice on it. And he just doesn't die. I don't think he even got wounded at this event, the Iron Ancestor. The Juggernaut did get killed, but it also had games where it also didn't get scratched. So, it's a fun list. Okay, any final comments before I wrap this one up? Any final questions? Because it's getting late and it's about time to end this. So while I'm waiting to see if there are any final questions that come in, I'll just let you know what else is coming up. There is an Age of Sigmar event that I'm attending, which is at Warhammer World, and that is in 2 weeks. Looking forward to that. I haven't been to a tournament at Warhammer World before, and I assume it's going to have lots of players because they sell out very fast. And I'm probably going to take a very similar list to the one I took to the previous tournament, which was significantly smaller. I'll probably take almost the same list. I might tweak a couple of magic spells in there, just to make it a bit more viable, because I don't think the spells I took were actually any good. I didn't really feel any benefit from them. I've got a 2-day Kings of War tournament next month, which is going to be exciting. I'm trying to get some more Night Stalkers painted so I can take a pure Night Stalker list rather than with allies. I think it's 2,300 points. So I need to get a couple more units done. I'm working on some models at the moment that I can use as either Soul Flayers or Fiends. So you'll see them when they're finished. And I haven't decided what I'm going to run them as. I'm sure Soul Flayers are going to get nerfed soon enough, so it's good that they're versatile models that I can use as Fiends later if I need to. And there is another Age of Sigmar event, a Halloween one, which is obviously at the end of October, so that'll be fun as well. And then in November there's a 1-day Kings of War tournament in Birmingham, which is the one that I won the crown at last time. So the Birmingham Bull Run, pretty sure it's in November, but I've got the best overall crown from the last one, and I might actually wear it to the event. Would that be too much? Let me know. I'm always keeping my eyes peeled for more events as well. Deadzone, Kings of War, Age of Sigmar. I'd keep my eyes open for Dreadball tournaments if there were any, but I don't think they are. Don't think there are any out there at the moment. And any other game systems would I be interested in, tournament-wise? I don't know. Am I competent enough in any other game systems right now to attend a tournament? I like bolt action. Would I go to a tournament? I don't know. I don't think my forces would be really competitive there. I think I'd have fun. I don't think I would win any games. What else? I don't think I would bother with 40k for the foreseeable future. Firefight is an option. I've got enough Plague stuff to take to a firefight tournament, but again, I just don't really like my Plague that much anymore. I would wait till I've got enough Forge Fathers before going to a firefight event, I think. And my Forge Fathers are kind of designed with firefight in mind, because I'm building more Iron Ancestors at the moment. And obviously I can't use that many in Deadzone, although saying that, I did manage to squeeze 2 Walkers into this list. And at 250 points I could definitely fit in 3. I could even probably do 2 Iron Ancestors and the Juggernaut at 250 points. Yeah, that would be exciting, wouldn't it? Anyway, time to wrap this one up. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description. Facebook group, Discord server, all that good stuff, Twitter, and obviously, if you value the unrivaled content that spews forth from this channel via the internet into your eyeballs and your ear holes on a regular basis, then why not help financially support this lighthouse, this beacon of hobby joy and tranquility, and those stormy seas guide you away from those seas and towards the shores. Why not pledge to the Patreon for this channel? Surrender your life savings so that more content may flow. You know it's worth it. And with that, all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.